Okay, at this point for your Cornell notes, you should have your name, the class block that you're in, or the class that you're in the period, the date, and your essential question written out. Down below we have our vocabulary. All your vocabulary words are here on the left-hand column, and on the right-hand column you should have the definitions here as you found them in your textbook. So after counterexample, we're going to go over some examples of using the vocabulary in this unit. The first thing I'd like you to do is to go ahead and write this in your notes. Write a conjecture that describes the pattern in each sequence. So go ahead and pause the video, write that down, and then I'm going to give you a pattern where you and I are going to work together to describe the pattern in the sequence. So we'll call this example A. The pattern I'm going to give you is 3, 6, 9, and 12. And I'd like for you to think about it for a second. How does 3 become a 6, and how does 6 become a 9, and how does a 9 become a 12, and what do those numbers have in common? And what's the conjecture that describes the pattern in this sequence? If you know it, go ahead and pause the video, write it down, and then I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the answer is. The conjecture is your educated guess. What do you think is happening based on the pattern that you see? And my conjecture based on this pattern is that each number in the sequence increases by 3. So I've written it in two different ways, and you can write both ways or you can write it in your own words. Each number in this sequence increases by 3, or we're going to add 3 to each number to get the next term in the sequence. And that's my conjecture, that's my educated guess based on the pattern that I'm seeing in the sequence. So now I'm going to present you with another problem. We'll call this example B, and I'm going to give you 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and see if you can come up with a conjecture that describes this pattern in the sequence. I'd like for you to pause the video and write down your conjecture. Okay, so after you've answered what your conjecture is, I ran out of paper, so I'm on my new page. Each page should start off with your essential question, your name, class, date, and period. And I would like to present you with this question: is this always true? If an animal has 4 legs, then it is a dog. Well, what do you think? Is that always true? And the answer is no. If an animal has 4 legs, it could also be a cat, a mouse, a turtle, so many animals, elephant, tiger, lion, bear. I could name so many animals. It does not necessarily mean that with 4 legs it's a dog. So we will say that this statement is false. The next part of our notes is that if a statement isn't always true, we can prove that statement false by giving what's called a counterexample. So when I was calling off all the different names for animals, that's an example of what's called a counterexample. It's an example that's going to prove your statement is false. Okay, so we want to write down what a counterexample is, and then go ahead and write down your counterexample, or if you can't think of a counterexample on your own, go ahead and write down what I've written. Now I'd like to ask you to give me a conjecture that you can come up with that isn't always true. So what I wrote prior, where I said that if an animal has 4 legs, it's a cat, that wasn't always true. I want you to come up with something along those lines. And then, since the conjecture that you're coming up with isn't always true, I'd like for you to also provide a counterexample for that conjecture. And then once you've come up with your statement that isn't always true and your counterexample, I would like for you to revisit the YouTube video. And after looking at that YouTube video, I want you to come up with a conjecture and write that conjecture as an if-then statement. So for example, if Charlie does this, then what will happen?